Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. I am on time with this week's color throwdown challenge after this crazy month that just turned into the most unimaginable craziness. But anywho, I will have a link to the color throwdown challenge in my blog post. That will be linked directly below the video. So I started off with my white card base. This is an A2 card base. And this definite favorite, this is my 12th video using Simon Says Stamp's Beautiful Flowers stamp set. Obviously, I'm obsessed with it. I've done so many videos using it, and I still have ideas for it. So I pulled that out. I used my MISTI creative corners to position the card base so that it wasn't right up against the edge, so I could stamp this huge stamp right across the card front, and I inked it up with VersaFine Clair Morning Mist or Morning Fog? I always forget with this one. Morning Mist ink, so just a gray ink. And then since I already had the stamp lined up in the positioner, I opened up the card base and stamped the image again, this time using Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide ink. So I masked off the top portion of the card, what will be the upper inside portion of the card, so I didn't get any stamping on there. And then I pulled the card base out of my MISTI, removed that great big stamp, and this time I'm going to use the individual flowers in the set, which honestly I can't remember if I've ever actually used these ones. In all the videos I've done and all the different cards I've made, I don't think I've used these stamps. I always use that great big stamp, which is, stained almost fully black because I've used it so much. But yeah, these three individual flowers in the set actually are the exact same as the ones in the clusters. So I am stamping them onto the smooth side of distress watercolor paper. I use my anti-static powder tool. I'm stamping these a couple times with clear embossing ink. I'm going to coat them with detail white embossing powder, and then I'm going to melt these with my heat tool. So just white on white, heat embossing, really, really simple. To color these, I'm going to use Distress Oxide sprays. I could have used the Distress Oxide ink that I stamped with. You'll end up with almost the exact same results per se. The spray, and because people ask me this, you cannot use the sprays to re-ink your ink pads. They are different formulations and types of ink. But for something like this where I'm, coloring the way I am, it doesn't matter which one you use. Yeah, I could have used the Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide ink pad and just smushed it. But I really like playing with the Distress Oxide sprays, and I like coloring with them like this. It just works so nicely, and I really like when the colors do actually separate a little bit, or the liquid separates a bit. So I shook up the bottle side to side. I'm working on my little Waffle Flower water media mat here, and I just took the nozzle out and just dabbed some of the color from the bottle onto the well of my media mat. And then I'm just painting with a little water brush, getting the area wet first, and then picking up the liquid oxide spray and painting with that. I've done other videos in the past doing this and mixing colors and that sort of thing too. They're fun. I haven't used my oxide sprays in a while. That's why I wanted to use these and not just paint with the Distress Oxide ink pad. Because yeah, I built up the collection and I now have every single color of the Distress Oxide sprays that sit in a basket as soon as I walk into my office area, and I keep telling myself I need to use them. So that's what I did. So really simple painting, literally. I just used this one color and I just filled in these flowers. That's it. No special technique needed. These ones especially, because there's already so much detail with the stamp lines and just everything that I just don't feel the need to go all out and do a bunch of, blending of colors and shading and depth and all that. I stuck that color down and that's it. So the only other thing I did was I did use a little ink pad. I used the Gathered TWIGS Oxide ink pad. I'm just going to lightly smush this onto the media mat. And I'm going to pick up the color with the water brush just to paint the centers. So there's that little bit of definition. So quickly paint that, and then I'm going to let these completely dry. Once they're dry, I am going to use the coordinating wafer dies to cut them out. So I'm going to tape these into place with some washi tape and then run them through my die cut machine. And again, made sure everything was dry. You don't want to die cut anything if it's still wet, because the cardstock can tear. So these didn't take very long to dry. Literally, they're dry in minutes. So taped the wafer dies into place and then ran these through my die cut machine. So I've got them all die cut. So after I have these die cut, I'm going to start working on all the other elements in the card, because of course, as I'm working on things, like more ideas start occurring to me. So I pulled out MOWED Lawn Distress Oxide Spray, and I have my card base here just on my media mat. I used that a little bit of the Post-it tape I'd used to mask off the inside of the card, just to hold the card base down. And then I shook the MOWED Lawn Oxide Spray side to side, and then did the same thing, put it in the well, and then I'm just picking it up with a paintbrush. I've shown in other videos where I just use the actual like tube from the nozzle to do splatter, but I've also learned the hard way that doing it that way is a lot more unpredictable and a lot more splatter. So depending on how much you want. So this, I knew I wanted a more controlled and small amount of splatter. So that's picking it up with the paintbrush and then just tapping it with my fingers. I'm kind of splattering it more around where the leaves and whatnot are, because I don't plan on coloring in this image at all. So it just kind of adds a little bit of that green, which is part of this color challenge. So then for the sentiments, I pulled out a piece of Nina Desert Storm cardstock, put that in my MISTI, and then I am lining up sentiments from the Beautiful Flowers stamp set. And then I'm going to stamp these with that same clear embossing ink and use the detail white embossing powder on these. So I started off with just these two, which are going to be for the front of the card. And then off camera, I ended up stamping more sentiments from that set onto this piece of cardstock and heat embossing those as well. And all of these I am going to die cut with the sentiment label wafer dies. So same thing, I'm going to line up the wafer dies and then hold them in place with some washi tape. And I'm going to do that for all of these partial sentiments. So then I'm going to have all of them die cut with these wafer dies. So run all these through my die cut machine, have them all die cut, and then I'm going to use my little guillotine trimmer here to trim off the ends to make everything straight and even. So after I was done die cutting and then trimming all of these sentiments, another thing I did was I went through my stash of cardstock and I found a green that I wanted to use. This is Lawn Fawn's Noble Fur cardstock. And I ran that through my die cut machine with the circle thin frames wafer die. I've used the rectangles in a couple of videos, but I don't think I've used the circles. I maybe have once. I can't remember. But yeah, pulled those out, die cut a couple circles with one of the frames. The inner portions I just put back with the rest of the cardstock I'll use for other projects. So I've got my two little frames here of green cardstock. And the whole plan is to kind of use these to sort of draw attention to the center of this flower cluster. So I'm going to adhere these into place with just my craft tacky glue. So I'm just going to run a really thin line of this glue on the back of each of these circles and then adhere them into place right onto my card base, letting the edges kind of hang off a little bit. So I got that adhered into place, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with the second circle. So just running that little bit of adhesive and then pressing that down into place. And then I originally was going to pop these flowers up with some foam tape, but decided I'm going to adhere them in the same way, just using the craft tacky glue. So like I said, these individual flowers are the exact same as the flowers in the cluster. So that way you can layer them, which I just love. And yeah, it kind of amazed me. I've had this set for over 2 years now. Yeah, I think it came out like 2 years ago. And I don't think I've ever done this. So I'm adhering these into place with the craft tacky glue, only really pressing down in the centers. So the edges are kind of popped up a bit. So it does give it that little extra dimension without me actually having to use any foam tape on the flowers. So I got those adhered into place. And then for the sentiments on the card front, I am going to cut down some Big Mama foam tape. So before I do that, I trimmed off the little bit of those die cut circle frames that were hanging off the edge of the card. And then I trimmed down some of the Big Mama foam tape for both of these sentiments. And then I'm going to peel off the backing and then pop these onto my card front. So once I've got those adhered, I'm going to adhere the other sentiments that I had stamped and heat embossed and die cut. I'm going to adhere those to the inside of the card. And like I always do, when it comes time to sending out cards like this, I write over what I've stamped. I'll just use a ballpoint pen or a gel pen, whatever I need, and I will write on top of it. That doesn't bother me. It's there. You can see it. It looks pretty. But I don't feel a need to like preserve it or anything, because like the front of the card is the most important, but then the message on the inside is more important than what I've like stamped and put on the inside, if that makes sense. So as a final little bit of embellishment, I pulled out some Studio Caudia gold sparkle crystals. These are clear crystals with little bits of like gold glitter in them, which I love, and I've used a ton of. And every time I use these, I keep reminding myself I need to order more, and then I forget, and then I use them, so I need to. So anywho, that is my card for this video. I will have links below the video to my blog post. In the blog post, I'll have links to the Color Throwdown Challenge. I'll have a supply list, all that info. You can check it out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!